There's something unsettling about beauty salons when the lights dim. During the day, they're noisy. Scissors clicking, dryers roaring, mirrors bouncing chatter back and forth. But after hours, when the shutters are down and the last cape still smells faintly of hairspray, they feel different, too quiet, too still. Across Asia, people whisper the same warnings. Don't linger in the stairwell after midnight. Don't try on the guest slippers if one pair feels too small. And whatever you do, don't stare too long into those facing mirrors. They reflect more than just you. Tonight, I have 3 accounts: Osaka, Bangkok, Seoul. Each one begins in a salon, a place meant for comfort, and ends somewhere you wouldn't want to follow. And before we start, a warning. If you ever find yourself alone in a salon late at night, and you hear your name whispered inside the hum of a dryer, don't look up. Story 1. Japan. The lash room above the noodle shop. Our first account takes us to Osaka, a city that rarely sleeps, where bright signs flicker against humid night air, and the smell of food lingers at every corner. But hidden above the noise, tucked into narrow stairwells and quiet second floors, are places most people walk past without ever looking up. One of those places is a small lash salon, perched above a steaming noodle shop. It was there, one late evening, that a woman, let's call her Aya, booked an appointment. She'd been working long shifts, too busy for daytime hours, and thought a late session would be quieter, more private. When she arrived, the street outside was still alive, the chatter of customers waiting for their bowls, the clatter of pots from the kitchen, and the faint metallic hum of a neon sign buzzing above the doorway. Aya climbed the short steps to the salon entrance and did what custom demands. She slipped off her shoes at the genkan, lining them neatly to the side. It was then that she noticed something small. Another pair of slippers, placed with the same careful precision, sat right beside hers. They were identical, same brand, same color, even the same scuff across the left toe. The only difference was the size. They were about half a size smaller, as though someone had ordered a duplicate. Almost right, but not quite. Aya hesitated for a moment, then stepped into the guest slippers provided. She thought perhaps another client had forgotten theirs. The stylist might have placed them there, or maybe they belonged to a family member. With that quiet logic, she brushed off the detail and began climbing the stairs. The staircase was narrow and steep, the kind you find in older buildings above street shops. Aya counted as she went, partly to distract herself, partly out of habit. 17 steps in total, each one creaking faintly under her weight. The air grew warmer as she ascended, carrying the faint citrus scent of cleaning solution mixed with broth drifting up from the restaurant below. At the top, she entered the salon. Bright white walls, polished floors, and 2 tall mirrors facing each other across the narrow room. In daylight, it would have felt clean and inviting, but at this hour, the mirrors seemed to multiply the space into a corridor that stretched far beyond where the room should have ended. The stylist greeted her softly, with that practiced calm of someone who has repeated the same phrases 100 times. Aya was guided into the reclined chair, her lashes carefully taped, and the quiet hum of a small dryer began to fill the silence. For a while, everything felt ordinary. Aya listened to the subtle sounds around her, the faint rustle of gloves, the tap of tools on the tray, the muted clatter from the noodle shop below. It was soothing. She closed her eyes and tried to let her body sink into the chair. But then, through the steady drone of the dryer, she heard something else. A whisper. A voice speaking her name. Not the way friends said it, not the casual nickname she heard at work, but her full name, spoken with precision, the way a teacher would call it during roll call. Aya froze. The stylist's hands were still near her temples, steady, unmoving. She wanted to believe it was just sound bouncing strangely between the mirrors. A trick of acoustics. But as she held her breath, she noticed something in the mirror above. Her reflection's chest kept rising and falling, the slow rhythm of breath. But she wasn't breathing. The reflection continued to inhale, exhale, a heartbeat late, as though it had decided to keep going on its own. Aya felt the cape shift lightly against her skin, but the air in the room was still. She told herself it was exhaustion. She'd been working long hours, running on little sleep. Her mind was playing tricks, but her pulse quickened all the same. The minutes dragged. She glanced at the wall clock. 2:14. The second hand twitched faintly, as if undecided, then froze. When she looked again, it jumped forward 3 minutes. 2:17. The missing time made her stomach turn. Finally, the session ended. The stylist removed the tape, guided her gently upright, and offered a small smile. Aya stood, still unsettled, and walked to the counter to sign the logbook. She picked up the pen, pressed it to paper, and froze. Her name was already there, written faintly, slightly overlapping the empty space where she was about to sign. The letters were hers, but thinner, less certain, as if someone had traced her handwriting just before she arrived. The stylist glanced at the page and shrugged softly. "Ink bleeds sometimes," she said. "Humidity." Her voice was polite, but her eyes lingered a moment too long before looking away. Aya left the salon, grateful for the cooler air in the stairwell. She began her descent, once again counting the steps to steady herself. 17 up, she thought. But on the way down, she reached 23. At the bottom, her shoes were waiting exactly where she had left them. But so were the smaller slippers, still neatly placed, still identical, but just slightly wrong. Aya slid into her own shoes and stepped out into the Osaka night. The noodle shop was alive with sound again, chatter and clatter spilling onto the street. The noise grounded her, but she couldn't help herself. She turned back for one last glance up the staircase. In the mirror at the top landing, she thought she saw the chair again. Someone was sitting there, too small for the seat, their feet not quite touching the ground. The cape rose and fell in steady rhythm, out of sync with her own breath. Aya turned quickly and walked toward the station, counting the storefronts, the seconds of the crosswalk lights. Numbers felt safe. Numbers made sense. But one number stayed with her. 17 steps up, 23 steps down. Story 2. Thailand, the mirror corridor by the Spirit House. From Osaka, we move south to Bangkok. A city that hums even after dark, where night markets glow under strings of bulbs, and incense burns at the base of small shrines. For locals, these shrines, spirit houses, aren't decoration, they're protection. They receive offerings of flowers, rice, and incense each evening, so whatever lingers in the unseen world has a place to stay. Just beyond one of these markets, tucked between a convenience shop and a tailor's stall, is a narrow stairwell leading to a family-run beauty salon. By day, it's cheerful and loud, but after hours, when the shutters are pulled and the market begins to thin, it takes on a very different quiet. One night, a client, let's call her May, visited for a private session. She was preparing for her wedding and needed a final bridal trial. The owner, kind and soft-spoken, agreed to keep the salon open late. May climbed the steps in the humid air, the faint scent of jasmine from the spirit house following her up. Inside, the air conditioning washed over her, cool and dry, carrying hints of hairspray and talc. The space felt ordinary, even comforting, but May noticed the layout. The salon's long row of mirrors faced each other directly, reflecting themselves into a corridor of repeating images that seemed to stretch far past the back wall. She didn't think much of it. Many salons are designed this way. Still, she caught herself glancing at her multiplied figure, feeling slightly uneasy at how still the reflections stood. The assistant greeted her warmly and began setting out pins and combs in neat rows on a silver tray. Each sound felt magnified in the quiet room. The faint scrape of a comb's teeth, the gentle click of a clip, the padded shuffle of sandals on tile. May sat still while the stylist adjusted her hairpiece, breathing in the sharp, chemical-sweet scent of spray. Then, something subtle. The Bluetooth speaker on her right played soft music, almost too low to notice. Yet from her left ear, she heard a murmur. 2 syllables, like a hushed greeting. The word, "Why?" Not spoken loudly, just breathed close enough that the warmth seemed to touch her skin. She turned slightly, but the assistant was at her right shoulder, focused on the pins. The comb lifted from the tray with the faintest scrape, rising as though a hand had picked it up. Yet no hand touched it. It hovered, then slid through May's hair with precise movements, parting strands as though guided by a skilled but invisible stylist. The owner laughed softly, a nervous laugh. "Wind," she said in Thai, though the air conditioning was steady, the vents unmoving. May smiled tightly, trying to rationalize it, but her stomach tightened. When she glanced at the mirror corridor again, she saw something she couldn't explain. The first few reflections showed her tilting her head slightly, blinking nervously. But 3 panels down, one version of her stayed perfectly still, eyes wide open, face relaxed, not moving at all. Like a photograph trapped among the mirrors, while the rest of her shifted forward. Her chest tightened. She blinked several times, trying to reset the image. The frozen reflection caught up a moment later, moving too late, as though time had lagged in one pane. In that salon, the mirror didn't show me. It showed whoever would miss me. That thought struck her suddenly, unbidden, like a sentence forming itself in her mind. A phone camera clicked. The assistant had snapped a photo to show May her hairstyle. The preview flashed for just a second, but in the corridor of mirrors, the third reflection down remained motionless, while all the others blurred in movement. The stylist continued working as if nothing was wrong. May forced herself to breathe evenly. She told herself this could all be explained. Mirrors distort angles. Light flickers in ways the eye doesn't register. Exhaustion can make sound bend and lag. Maybe she had been so focused on herself that she imagines a stillness where there was none. At last, the session ended. The owner asked May to wait to the spirit house before leaving. "It is good practice," she said gently, placing her palms together. The assistant joined her, bowing their heads. May followed their lead. She stepped to the doorway where the small shrine stood, lit by a flickering candle. The scent of jasmine was stronger now, heavy and sweet. She placed her palms together and bowed. The candle guttered, nearly went out, then steadied with a small flame. They stepped into the stairwell together. Rain pattered softly outside, the night air heavy with moisture. And then they saw it. On the top step of the stairwell was a single wet footprint. Left foot only, clear and sharp, as though someone had just stepped out of the rain. The footprint pointed upward, back toward the salon. No matching right foot ever followed. The owner whispered something in Thai under her breath, too quiet for May to catch. The assistant bent down and carefully placed the smallest pair of guest slippers beside the footprint, as though leaving them there as an offering, or perhaps an answer. May began her descent, her hand gripping the rail. She counted the steps, telling herself it was only to steady her nerves. 12, 13, 14. The numbers carried her weight, grounding her. At the bottom, she reached 22. She tried to remember if she had counted the top landing on her way in. She couldn't. When she reached the market, the noise of vendors packing up and scooters humming past wrapped around her like a shield. She turned once more to glance up at the salon's glass door, and in the reflection, the mirror corridor remained. Row upon row of her own image, receding into the distance. All of them moved naturally, except one. The still version, 3 panels down, turned its head just slightly, too slow to belong to her. Later, May examined the candid photo the assistant had sent to her phone. At first, it looked ordinary, but zooming in, the still reflection's pupils didn't align with her own. They pointed fractionally off, toward the deeper corridor. The file information said 9:41 p.m., ISO 200, f/2.0. Everything perfectly normal, except for that single frozen version of herself, staring into a place she hadn't looked. And on the stairwell floor that night, the wet footprint measured exactly 28 centimeters. Only one. Only left. Story 3, South Korea, the hospital wig room. After lights out from Bangkok, we travel north to Seoul, a city where the night never really ends, its streets glowing with neon, its subways humming long after midnight. Yet inside hospitals, the night feels different. Sterile, controlled, a silence broken only by the hum of fluorescent lights and the occasional squeak of rubber soles on polished floors. On one of those nights, in a public hospital not far from the river, a woman, let's call her Ji-yoon, walked down a quiet corridor toward a room she hadn't known existed until that day, a place volunteers called the wig room. It was small, tucked into the oncology wing, and supposedly open late for patients who didn't want to be seen during the day. The door bore a neat sign, "Wig room / quiet please." Inside, the air was different, warmer than the corridor, carrying the faint sweetness of synthetic hair mixed with disinfectant. Styrofoam mannequin heads lined the shelves, each one topped with wigs of different cuts and shades, their painted eyes looking past her as if into some place far away. The stylist greeted her softly, a middle-aged woman with calm, practiced hands, the kind of voice you want to believe when she says it will be fine. Ji-yoon sat in the chair and tried to relax. For a while, everything was ordinary. The steady snip of scissors, the whisper of a comb, the gentle weight of a wig being adjusted against her scalp. Then the sound came. The 3-note chime. High, soft, unmistakable. The same sound hospitals across Korea use before making an announcement over the PA system. But there was no speaker in this room. Ji-yoon paused. The stylist, without breaking rhythm, said nothing. She told herself the sound had leaked in from the hall, yet when the chime rang again, it came from her left. And at the very same moment, the cool draft she felt against her cheek brushed from the right. Sound and air moving in opposite directions. She shifted in her chair, unease prickling at the back of her neck. The stylist adjusted the wig calmly, as if nothing had happened. On the wall above the counter hung a clock, 2:10 a.m. The second hand ticked forward, steady, snip, snip, comb, comb. Then, as Ji-yoon stared at it, the second hand twitched, once, twice, and froze. The room seemed to hold its breath. When the hand moved again, it didn't sweep through the missing time. It leapt directly to 2:17. Her phone, resting in her lap, read 2:11. Ji-yoon swallowed hard. Fatigue, she thought. It had to be fatigue. Hospitals distort time. Anyone who spent a night in one knows this. Minutes stretch, contract, fold in on themselves. She was tired, and her senses were playing tricks, but the mirror disagreed. In its reflection, she could see the corridor behind her, even though the wig room faced inward toward the hospital's light shaft, not the hall. And in that corridor, 3 steps of a stairwell landing appeared. Steps that should not have been visible from here. For a moment, they were empty. Then a shadow formed on the 3rd step down, the faint shape of a heel, then nothing. Like someone had paused halfway, deciding whether or not to enter. Ji-yoon blinked, and the landing was empty again. The stylist, unfazed, continued her work. Her movements were measured, deliberate. "Almost done," she said, her voice low. Ji-yoon's eyes drifted back to the shelf of mannequin heads. She counted them without meaning to. 8. No. 9. She blinked again, back to 8. Her skin prickled. She told herself stress explained it. The human mind fills in blanks, miscounts in dim light. The hospital was playing its tricks. And yet, when she glanced back to the doorway, the shoes placed neatly outside caught her attention. Ordinary hospital slippers, lined up for guests. All except one pair. Small, pink, decorated with a cartoon bear. A child's pair. Perfectly placed, but impossibly out of place in an adult oncology ward. The stylist gave no sign of noticing. She adjusted the wig one last time, then stepped back to let Ji-yoon see herself in the mirror. Ji-yoon barely recognized the face looking back at her. The wig transformed her, softened her, made her look like someone she used to be. For a moment, she almost forgot the strangeness. until she noticed the corridor again in the reflection. The stairwell was back, and on the third step down, the shadow had returned. This time, it didn't move. Ji-yoon blinked once. The shadow remained. She blinked again. Still there. The stylist placed a hand lightly on her shoulder. "All finished," she said. Ji-yoon stood, her knees unsteady. She thanked the woman softly, forcing a polite bow. Then she turned to the counter where a small ledger sat for visitors to sign. She opened it, pen in hand, and froze. Her name was already there, written faintly in shaky strokes as though copied. The same letters, the same order, just slightly out of alignment, as if written by someone watching her hand move and trying to follow along. She pressed her own name beneath it, her pen trembling. The two signatures blurred together like twin shadows. She left quickly, the wig box tucked under her arm, and stepped back into the corridor. The oncology floor was hushed, patient doors closed, the air sharp with disinfectant. She passed the stairwell. On impulse, she glanced through its small window, and there, in the glass, she saw herself, standing on the landing 3 steps down, watching her. Ji-yoon turned away, forcing herself toward the nurse's station. The nurse on duty smiled at her kindly and signed her out without looking at the clock. The record read 2:14 a.m. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. 2:42. 2 truths, side by side. She said nothing. Later, at home, she pulled up the hospital's online floor plan. Room 214, the wig room she had sat in, was listed simply as storage. She scrolled back to the photo she had taken of the door before entering. The sign was clear. Wig room / quiet, please. The metadata of the photo read 2:14 a.m. 52 steps recorded on her fitness tracker. But when she had walked it again the next day, in daylight, the same distance measured only 18. Across Asia, beauty salons and mirrored spaces carry strong associations with the supernatural. In Japan, stairwells and slippers are tied to folk beliefs. If an extra pair appears, it may signify a lingering presence. In Thailand, mirrors are thought to create corridors where spirits can slip through, and spirit houses are placed nearby to appease wandering souls. In Korea, hospitals are already considered liminal spaces between life and death, and objects like wigs or children's slippers can take on uncanny meaning. The common thread is that these are threshold places, where reflection, identity, and transition make people vulnerable to unseen forces. Staying too late in such places, especially after midnight, breaks a cultural taboo. You're lingering in a zone where the living and the dead overlap. Of course, not everything needs a supernatural explanation. Stress and fatigue, especially in late-night settings, can cause misperceptions. Hospitals, old salons, and small stairwells often distort sound and light in eerie ways. Echoes in narrow rooms, time misperceptions from exhaustion, and even minor structural quirks like uneven steps or mirror angles can trick the senses. Coincidence, too, can heighten fear. An old logbook entry or misplaced slippers might feel meaningful when paired with unease. Yet these explanations don't erase the chill of the details. Why do the steps count differently? Why does the reflection move out of sync? Why does time skip? Are these just tired minds grasping for sense, or fleeting glimpses of another presence waiting in the silence? What do you think happened? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more true ghost stories from across Asia.